during the day, so we're capable to understand how to hold a tool and not just how to think, and talk. So hands are very important in your life. As the Japanese say, if you work with your hands, you'll live a lot longer. So that's a Japanese kind of a idea about the quality of life. Your hands are part of you, not just to feed you, but to make things. So I always gravitated to material. I taught how to make, I was an air cadet. I taught how to make airplane models out of balsa wood and paper, and I was a kind of an instructor at an early age. And then life went on, You move to another country, you start to find a place, and art, especially American art, came into life, I guess, in the 50s and 60s as a uniquely American art. So I came into the place at the right time. What drove me to do that? I don't know. I did, graduated from International School of Photography. I worked as a photojournalist for a while. But what really drove me is I like the hands-on quality of what people make. And paintings and sculpture is essentially, we're working whether it's wood, whether it's steel, whether it's stone, marble, Most great artists, I'm not consider myself, but most great artists worked like Michelangelo, worked with, with marble, painted. There was no limit in what he wouldn't do or wouldn't try, right? Yeah. Any of the great artists. So, who knows? I don't come from the genes that have a lot of artists in my family, but so you come out as the different P, right?
Yeah.
And here I am, 50, 60 years later. That's what I still do. Now, you obviously have to get a reaction or a reception or some sort of a feedback, so you don't operate in a vacuum just for yourself. So it started to get recognition, and with recognition comes, satisfaction, a sense of quality, and you move on, and it just doesn't stop. You make more and more and more. Of course, you got to give up a lot of other things. Being rich is not an idea that you but you're rich in quality of life, and I didn't suffer from poverty, but I'm very aware of it. I've been around it. We all have. So I live in the Middle East, so of course you'd get it. So here I am all the time. It flew by like a week. Your life just all of a sudden you say, wow, here I am, I did the usual thing. I got married, had a couple of kids, but I did all that all the same, and always there was a temptation to go into another field, to supplement it. A lot of stuff got into real estate and that, but I eliminated almost everything and gambled on myself. I kind of pretty much invested all my money on myself. It sounds selfish, not that I wasn't what I consider generous with other people around me. I have brothers, you needed help, I have, So I wound up in the right places at the right time for unknown reason, and just was aware that I was around very special people, and liked people that are older and more experienced than I to learn from. So, and that's followed my progression. Now, you ask me how to, so really because of space issues and to find anything in New York, you paint, it's more comfortable, right? But I wanted a certain quality of age and flatness in my work. And people that work with acoustic, like Bryce Martin, or Chamberlain, that's kind of, I had influences, Larry Rivers, Chamberlain, Bryce, which I interacted with a personal level and became friends, and teachers and comrades, as they say. So how did I wind up with this oxidized steel? And I spent some time in Mexico, in Zihuatanejo, And my friend Larry River had a studio there, so he would let me use it to paint, right? And what I wanted is a much flatter surface rather than the conventional. What intrigued me was, if you're in Mexico or in Europe, like Greece, or North Africa, mostly, or any place where they're fishermen, for example, right? And the colors that they have in their little boats that they turn over for generations and sand them and repaint them and sand them and repaint them, right? So there's a layer of paint behind the paint, which I wanted to get. As a young person, when I was a kid, I lived near a beach in the Mediterranean, and all the immigrants and all the refugees and all the people that traveled from one place to the other, when they arrived, they just dumped their boats, right? So there were a couple of boats, a few, near where I lived, and as kids we used to play on those boats that happened to have rusted and turned over. So it became kind of my playground on top of these rusted, broken down boats. They were no longer boats. They were just kind of objects in the ocean. And the color of rust always intrigued me, and the quality of the material. And that's how I took off. And it took years to evolve after painting, going to all the art schools that you go in, stay a year or two and leave, because what you do really can't be taught, because you gotta really create a material that you own, and you own it, you know what I mean? And you own the material, that's how you get. There are a lot of great graphic artists, there are a lot of people that can draw fantastic, but how do you separate from the crowd, In other words, so it's timing, it's serendipitous as to how people just, out of a certain group, because at any given time there's a lot of good artists around. Now how come this one all of a sudden, how come you get a Rauschenberg? How come, you get Jasper Johns or Chamberlain? Or why are they the ones, I don't know, maybe there's no way to explain it, right? I mean, were there a lot of Picassos around? Of course not. But there were a lot of great artists in the 50s in Paris and all over. So I guess a bit of luck and a bit of just keeping at it and not giving up. So painting, so the quality of the surfaces always intrigued me, because they say when you paint, you can have a lot of sun, right? It will kind of fade the colors, or you can have a lot of light. The painting shouldn't be exposed to a lot of light. Yet I am there in Mexico, and when I was visiting Greece, or I was in Morocco, the sides of the buildings are covered with these beautiful colors, I mean, in India you have a blue city, you have a pink city, and it lasts for generations, and the colors don't really fade. So I was trying to get it in painting, and I realized that there were certain pigments that I really can mix with my paint. The only problem is that real paint, like oil paint, is made out of pigments, linseed oil, and some binder, right, to hold it together. What happens after years, if it's not, it starts to separate. The glues and the paint from the canvas and the gesso, eventually with temperature and light starts to separate. Yet on the wall, like Barragan and, and who was Barragan's student, I forget, also great. They painted these walls, and his sense of color just intrigued me. And being in Mexico, Lagareta was, I think it was his student. So here I am, and I'm painting like traditional on canvas, and which you'll see here. And I was doing quite well, but I couldn't get in. I'm walking with Larry with his one day out of the studio. I said, "Oh, this is nice. This is nice." And some of the pigments I was using fell on some steel, on some steel outside, and it rusted in the same color. The process of oxidation gave the steel that color. And I said, well, here it is. I don't have to have, a fresco has the same quality. You put it outside, it's on the wall just with pigment, but I can't carry a wall around with me, right? So I looked, Larry looks at me and I look at Larry. I said, Larry, this is what I want. So it took me 30 years to develop the process, right? But even when I started, there was a gallery, Ivan Carper was one of the great dealers, and he liked my paintings, and he showed some. And he said, but when I showed him the stuff I did on steel in Mexico, he says, okay, I want to show these, And so that, he has a good eye. So I progressed from that, and that became my signature work, right? I was all of a sudden recognized because it was uniquely, and probably hasn't been done before that way, and I owned it. So now I can get, now there's a catch with owning something. Dealers want the same thing over and over and over, but I've changed a lot, and that carried me through. So that's my development to find something that's uniquely my own, and I was discovering it, not even knowing, but it's kind of accidental or serendipitous that it just fell there and I had another eye looking at it with me. So that's how it all came about. Because with the painting I was doing quite well. So you know what, when you change, it's like almost suicidal, because people, but I did change. And I tend to, I wouldn't call it change, but I make a lot of different things with the same process. So, like those guitars, I have no limits in what I want to investigate. My own limits. I mean, not that I'm limitless. And essentially, that's what intrigued me. The flatness. If you look at an oil painting, it's a different quality. It's like on the canvas. This is in the steel. You know what I mean? And it really, with age, it just moves in and in and in. I moved on from rust, but I include rust in my project. And I just looked at those oxidation as colored rust, and I use inorganic pigments that bind to this material, and they become very permanent. Now, it took me a long time because nobody trusted that it does, And as you can tell on this one or that one, this is all purely rust and pigments, right?
Yeah.
Zinc. So, I don't know, so I started to show, and it has a reception, and some big, nice galleries picked me, like Marlboro or something amongst them, which I didn't have a show with because that's another story, but it had a reception. And then came Sundaram Tagore, who was just a great dealer for me, he was, and took to it, and I was with him for 10, 15 years. He's a descendant of Rabindranath Tagore, the famous Indian poet laureate, won a Nobel Prize for poetry, who came from a long line of artists in the family from Calcutta. And he took me all over the world, my work that is, which is me. As what did Matisse said? Art is my wife, and my wife is my mistress, right? This kind of. So that became essentially, it became that that's all I do, and it kept me alive all that time, which is, as Alex Katz said, if you're still making art paying your rent with it after the age of 60, you've succeeded, you know what I mean? So I start, I guess, with an idea that strikes you, or an image that you've seen, or something, like de Kooning used to start his painting. He would cut it oops, is that, he would cut lips of a woman out of the newspapers and put it on a big canvas and start there, and then it became these women kind of. So you choose, you don't know why you choose what you choose, but you do. And what do I know where I'm going or where I'm going to end up? Art is like unprecedented knowledge. You know, you're looking for something particularly, but as you're looking, you know, it's like getting lost in a car. You find things that you would have never seen. So when you start a work, you're looking to produce something specific, but you can't get stuck. So this is a very good example. That I started with the idea of really, that I saw an image, you know, there was a beautiful photograph of a place. I didn't have to go there like the old days and put a canvas up and look at it and plein air kind of painting, and it stuck in me, and this was years ago, but I never got a chance to really get to it, to have enough free time or enough money in the bank to take a chance. Like my last show was made of rice and beans and toilet paper, right? Because when the pandemic hit, you know, I didn't want to draw the pandemic viruses, I wanted to, again, use the elemental things we use and need to survive, like rice and bean is eaten all over the world. It's just recognizable, right? And at the end, that's the least expensive meal that all poor people eat, right? With anything, whether it's China, Mexico, Middle East, you know, except maybe Italy that has spaghetti, right? But rice and beans is an image that translates something to everyone, right? Why did I do the toilet paper? What happened was, it reminded me that I came out here, I came to the studio, I was in the city, I think, and I needed to get some toilet paper. So I went into the supermarket, you know, and I got a bunch of toilet paper. Well, I have two places, so I didn't get enough, so I went the next day to get toilet paper. You couldn't get toilet paper. There was an avalanche of people. Remember they said that you're going to be out of toilet paper? That's the thing that came with the pandemic came. And the supermarkets empty of toilet paper. People got into fights over toilet paper. People paid 100 times the price of a regular $1. So it reminded me of a story that I used to show with a guy who was, I believe, Chinese, who was from the Far East, Taiwan, China, somewhere. And when the gold was under gold standard, which was about $32 an ounce, everybody had gold. It had a value, but not, it had more of a value as for other reasons. So, and when they took it off the gold standard, it all of a sudden went up to what, $1,000 an ounce? I don't know what it is now, but it just went absurd. Now this guy painted and he melted gold into his painting, right? So this collector bought a few of his pieces, right? I don't know, $5,000, $10,000 was the piece. And when the gold standard went and gold went up, he melted the guy's works to get the gold out of it. What I'm saying is the value of some substance can all of a sudden, on a dime, change from this amount of money to this amount. Well, the same thing, let's use the Duchampian, you know, idea about the toilet hung on the wall that all of a sudden, right? I said, why is toilet paper all become, you know, when you grew up in the old days, you just cut newspapers, wipe your ass, and some people just white on the shake with the left hand. That was the hand that wiped your ass with. So I said, you know what? So toilet paper, all of a sudden, it was like salt in the old days, right? You got paid in salt, in the Roman legions got paid in salt, not in money. And then, or tulips in Holland, the value of something all of a sudden changes because of the needs, right? So that intrigued me, so I did a series of toilet paper. And lo and behold, they sold in auctions, and some people collecting it for $1,000 or $1,500, just toilet paper with some rice on it. So what happened here? It's same rice and toilet paper, right? That if you kind of take it, it had a certain value and use, but the use was, so that was the idea of that show, which was called Rice and Beans. That was my contribution to the pandemic art scene, So you really also follow, Larry once told me that art's like fashion, one day you're in fashion, the next day, and younger people come around, and now there are a lot of artists in a lot of galleries. When I grew up, maybe 10 galleries, 15 galleries in New York, and art at certain values, but it wasn't worth like the millions that it is today. So that's a commodity also. And the story is, I remember the day when Rauschenberg's first work went up in auction, and he got a huge amount of money, like $1 million or something. And there was a couple in New York, the Skulls, that collected together. They were married, right? And he started Skulls Angel, which is a taxi. All the taxis were called Skulls Angels, right? So they split up as a couple and went through a divorce, and she got her work, and she had the Rauschenberg, and for state reasons, she auctioned it. So Rauschenberg went with her to the auction, right? The painting got $1 million in auction. So when they come out, they ask Rauschenberg, you must really feel good. He said, feel good? Fuck you. He said, I don't feel good. She made the money. I got $700 for that painting. So that also said, nobody, who would buy him, Rauschenberg was a lot of, so that's, I don't know how I got into the value of things. So you value things and you do it timely, but you don't really know what's going to happen. Look at Basquiat, right? So in relationship to fashion and what goes on and picks up and next, So you just keep on trucking and do what comes naturally to you. Some people, I guess, adopt. Vermeer couldn't sell his paintings at all, so he painted over some of them. So most artists, I guess, no one starts making, $100,000 for his painting, When you start, you kind of, so that relates to the rice and beans and the value of things. Where were we? I don't know why I digressed on this. But,
Okay.
But that's, so in your lifetime, if you survive in making art, it's not easy, right? Sort of, everybody knows, it's an accomplishment in itself. I always said that making a lot of money is a lot easier than making good art, so I chose that preference. Not that I don't like money, so it's nothing against money, right? But you have to have an audience.
I didn't even think.
You have, so you bet on yourself. Some people bet on the horses, some people bet on real estate, and all together, but they forget to bet on themselves. I don't know that they all do, but most find that once you have a lot of money, okay, what do you do now, right? With art, I don't think it stops, whether you have a lot of money or don't have a lot of money. Artists would just continue making art, not that it's so unique and separated, or maybe they are, they register what's happening at a certain time through photographs, and I did a lot of photography, and schooled in photography, and I just found it, I needed to work with my hands myself. It was almost second generation. You take the photograph, you can, it's just a matter of choice. I love photography, good photography. And it's just as difficult, good photography nowadays, especially when everybody's got a camera and taking a million pictures. When I worked as a photojournalist, I had a boss, and I used to use 4x5 Graflex camera with a bulb still, right? And he used to send me on a project, right? Like boxing matches or MacArthur's funeral or we used to go to conventions. And he said, look, that's before the automatic cameras came, before motorized cameras and before digital cameras. He gave me a roll of film. He says, come back with the pictures. He says, I don't need 100 pictures. And when it's the loaders, you know, the sheets, the 4x5 sheets are there, he says, I'm giving you 4 sheets. You know, come with a story. I don't know, he worked for the news. We worked for Agence France Presse and Deutsche Presseagentur. He says, a good photographer can get, and he was telling me a story about when they had the ball for all the girls that came out to the society. What is it called? The society ball, right? At the Waldorf. He said, and you have to learn some tricks, you know, in photojournalism. I said, like what? He says, well, everybody goes to photograph all the beautiful young girls that are coming into society as they come down the staircase in photos. So I said, so what did you do? He says, well, we bought a box and about 20 mice. And when I was ready to shoot the picture, I told my assistant to release the mice. And when the girls saw the mice, they go, ah! And they ran around, and you got a great picture. Nowadays, so you learn, it's tricks in a trade. I guess with paintings, you learn that you got to be inventive. You know, everybody's got a camera and everybody's the same subject. How do you separate from the crowd with a good photo, right? A lot of it is accidental. You click when it happens. Nowadays, you can take 1,000 photos, erase them, and it's a whole different game. It's more difficult now to come up with a great photo because so many people, and it's kind of easy. So things, you know, changed also with paintings. There are many, many more galleries. The art schools are popping out students at a rate because art schools are very profitable. You get some guy, you know, who's an abstract guy and teaches him how to paint, but you only need that for a while. So you gotta, and it's a pretty solitary kind of like writers. Life, you know, in the studio, you know, when you get a little more big, like Rauschenberg again or Lichtenstein, where you get a lot of assistants, you know. It's not that Michelangelo or Da Vinci had a lot of assistants for their idea, but that kind of grows out of that. But at the end, you have to be by yourself a lot, you know, to have the courage to do that with not somebody, no, I don't like that, I like that, because it influences you a little bit. And there was a book called The Left Side of the Brain, which tried to teach parents how to not to spoil a kid that's talented. And the way they explain it to him, it says one of the things that ruins someone's imagination is, like the parents, you got a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, to give him canvas and stuff. And no matter what he does, it's beautiful. You know, look at what, you got to be careful and not sort of comment, this is nice, this is not nice. And the idea is, this is not, keep on going, you know, and you don't go, oh, look, it's beautiful. And so we would tend to make the same thing over because he got such a positive reaction, you know. So he really doesn't have the time to judge for himself what he likes. So it's a beautiful book about, you know, how to paint and how to think about painting. Left side of the brain, of course then they did right side of the brain. Okay.